Today on the LA Food Podcast, I'm your host Lucas Servodio, humming along to the tune of City of Stars from the 2016 film La La Land, because that's exactly what Los Angeles is. Michelin held its 2024 California Guide ceremony earlier this week, and it's fair to say that LA restaurants fared rather well. Jordan Kahn's Vespertine earned back its 2 stars, Holbox, Uka and Meteora earned their first, and LA also dominated the list of new Bib Gourmands. But, like I ask my therapist on a weekly basis, what does it all mean? Fear not, dear listener, Father Saul's on the pod today to help us make sense of it all. But that's not all. We also discuss the crucial matter of whether aspiring Vice President of the United States Tim Walz is a foodie, why Pete Wells decided to go all get off my lawn on his final essay as critic of the New York Times, and a brilliant new series from Eater exploring iconic regional dishes from around the country. Finally, we've got part 2 of our interview with Botanica's Heather Sperling. Last week's part 1 received rave reviews, especially from those who appreciate behind-the-scenes looks at restaurant operations. Well, part 2 is even better. Heather and I discuss in detail the factors making restaurant finances so damn difficult these days, and what can be done to ease the burden both for businesses and, get this, landlords. I bet you weren't expecting that. We also talk about the exciting food happening at Botanica, of course, and why you as a consumer should feel good supporting a business such as theirs. Quick reminder, all the articles we discussed today are available in our LA Food Stack newsletter, available for free at the link in the show notes. Thanks to everyone who's been reading it, subscribing to it, supporting it. It means the world. Without further ado, let's chow down. Dear listener, I made a deal with my wife. She let me start a food podcast and eat ungodly amounts of noodles, pizza, sandwiches, and more under 2 conditions. One is that I never utter her name. The other is that I find ways to be healthy outside of my work in food. Being the fantastic partner I am, I found a few ways to up my health game. I exercise almost every day, I try to sneak in salads for lunch whenever I can, and I only ever snack on healthy foods. The macadamia nut has become an essential part of my daily routine, with the best omega-6 to 3 ratios in the nut game, 8 times better than pistachios and 20 times better than cashews. At houseofmacadamias.com, they've got a bunch of different macadamia products that you can enjoy, like savory and sweet snack packs and chocolate-covered snack bars. One of the problems with macadamias I've found is that they can be expensive, but I'm solving this for you, dear listener, because as of today, all you've got to do is head to houseofmacadamias.com and use code LAFOOD to get a 10% discount on a healthy snack that also happens to be delicious. So what are you waiting for? Head to www.houseofmacadamias.com/discount/LAFood and go nuts. Welcoming back to the LA Food Podcast, a man whose loss in our annual Champions League bet just got a whole lot more expensive. It's Father Saul. Father Saul, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. Michelin really has it out for me this year. Between planning my mom's Mexico City birthday trip, where every single restaurant I wanted to take her got starred, so it's going to be impossible to get reservations, to now our Vespertine bet, which hopefully won't be more expensive, but certainly more difficult to lock down as well. So get off my back, Michelin. What's the deal?
Well, it might be more expensive if the only way we can lock down a table is by going to one of those like reservation resale sites where you have to like spend $200 to even lock down the table.
I refuse to engage with that. So hopefully not. But as Pete Wells tells us, it's getting hairy out there for reservations. No, I will find a way. Open Table has never let me down yet.
Oh my God, we'll get to that whole Pete Wells thing. You asked to move our podcast recording up half an hour today. What you got going on this PM?
Oh, I was going to take Emily to a doctor's appointment for this weird rash she got on her foot. She definitely didn't expect me to share this. So it was at 5:15. So I said, oh yeah, move it up a little bit. But no, it seems to be self-healing. So we just aren't going to worry about it.
Well, thanks for front-loading the shitty Yelp review of the week right there in terms of disclosing partner medical history.
There you go.
But yeah, we've already touched on the big deal of the day today, dear listener. Michelin held their California ceremony up at Half Moon Bay in the Bay Area, and there was some pretty good news for LA. But let me start with this, Father Saul. Why do you think that we weren't invited to the ceremony?
Oh, I can't imagine why us just constantly talking shit every chance we get on this podcast about food awards might have something to do with it. We'll have to we'll raise our profile. We'll do some kissing up today. No, not really, actually, but one day we'll get that all important invite.
Hey, I don't know. The White House still invites Fox News to the briefing room. I figured I'm not trying to compare us to Fox News, but I'm just saying, like,
you kind of did though.
But I kind of did, though.
If we were Fox News, who would you be? Who's your guy?
Who's my guy? I hate that you assume it's a guy.
Oh, fair point. You're Laura Ingraham. That's your personality.
I'm Laura motherfucking Ingraham, and you know it. You're obviously what, like Trey Gowdy?
Is he still on there? Maybe like Geraldo Rivera for like the one ethnic voice thing. I don't know if he still goes on. I feel like he's retired at this point, but
yeah. So, dear listener, you are now listening to the Laura Ingraham and the Geraldo Rivera of food podcasting.
Let's not do this. Damn.
Oh, all right. Well, hey, let's actually talk about the actual awards because it was a big night for Los Angeles specifically. The new 2024 guide spotlighted 577 restaurants across the state, including 85 California restaurants with stars. When it comes to Los Angeles, there was a few notable new stars. First and foremost, I think it's we've already alluded to this, but Jordan Kahn's Vespertine regained the 2 stars that it had before it previously closed, which was sort of the big headline of the night for Los Angeles. It joins, I want to say, 3 other 2-star restaurants in Los Angeles, one being Providence.
Hyoto, Melise, and Providence, alongside Vespertine, are the 2-star restaurants in Los Angeles.
Thank you for your 11th hour help there. Melise, Providence, and Hayato. So now with those 3, we've got Vespertine, and they also got a green star, which is like the sustainability award. In addition to the 2 stars, there were also a few restaurants that got their first ever stars, including Uka, Meteora, also by Jordan Kahn, and nearest and dearest to our heart, most likely, Gilberto Cetina's legendary Holbox over at Mercado La Paloma. So, any reaction to the new stars?
I mean, not beyond wanting to go to these restaurants. They've kind of been on the list for a while. And of course, shout out to Holbox, where we celebrated last year's Champions League bet. You bought me dinner at the counter with Gilberto Cetina. Awesome dinner. Very happy for him for the recognition. Notably, only number 3 on the LA Countdown taco rankings. Maybe you have a higher standard than the Michelin guide itself.
Well, that's obvious. Yeah, no, I just love the fact that Chef Cetina like literally was trolling me about the fact that he only got number 3. And so what I did is I created a plaque for him and brought it to the restaurant. And last time I went to the restaurant, the plaque was still up amongst the like Michelin stars and stuff. There's the bronze medal from the LA Countdown's 2022 taco ranking.
Love it. It'll sit now right above the 1 star from Michelin he just earned.
I asked him, was it better than when I gave you the plaque? And he was like, nah, not even close. Seriously.
Love that. No, otherwise, I mean, cool to see the restaurants recognized. I'm excited to dive into this a little bit because I have some takes on Michelin in California. Yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts were as well.
Well, I think that my main thoughts are going to be about the sort of other awards that were given out tonight, which was the fact that the 2024 guide also added 10 new Bib Gourmands restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of those were in the LA area. 6 were like definitely LA area. A couple are like arguable depending on how you define LA. But those are Gras, the pizzeria in Echo Park, which in my ranking of pizzerias back in 2021 was number 2. Okay, so I think I'm onto something. Little Fish, the sort of like fried fish sandwich spot that also opened up in Echo Park, and Quarter Sheets. Echo Park is like a Bib Gourmand city at this point, which was very much not the case when we lived there, I might add. Then also we have Lou's Cafe in Koreatown, which I went to today. Thai Town's May Malai, which is one of my favorite noodles that I've had so far on my noodle journey, La Puente's Manohar's Deli Palace, which I unfortunately have not been to, and Pollo La Brasa, the Peruvian rotisserie spot, which has locations all over town. There's a couple other spots that, there's Cedro, a place in Newbury Park, which I think is technically Ventura County, but, some more generous people might consider that LA area. But to me, it really stood out that Los Angeles really seems to have a stranglehold on the Bib Gourmand category. I mean, of 10 new additions, 7 to 8 were in the LA general region. What does that say?
Well, I think it speaks to kind of the high quality of cuisine across the range of, I guess, form of delivery that LA has, right? I mean, so versus maybe your typical big cities in the United States or even medium-sized cities, I feel like LA really has this like strong middle class, quote unquote, of restaurants where some people may comment that we don't have like the highest of highest end fine dining, but I appreciate the level of recognition. I'm almost more excited for the Bib Gourmands because it speaks to the quality of just like your local neighborhood restaurant, your Pollo a la Brasa, your quarter sheets. I'm going to shout out Trencher. Back in the day, Trencher deserved one of these, which has since been replaced by the Quarter Sheets location. So I'm going to give an honorary one in in memoriam of Trencher. But
if anybody out there knows who the fuck was behind Trencher, have them reach out to us because we may be Trencher's like fans of all time.
They were the best, man. So I think that's really what it speaks to, right? That there's like this strong, like more casual, easier on the wallet, but high quality dining in LA, which I think is accurate, and I appreciate the recognition.
We had a similar conversation back when it was also a Michelin or a James Beard related conversation. We had talked about how like relative to the Bay Area, Los Angeles, yes, is a very expensive place to have a restaurant, but compared to the Bay Area, it's still a little bit more affordable. Like you do have like some up and coming neighborhoods. You do have like places that are a little bit more of a drive, but where rent is a little cheaper. And so you have places where restaurateurs can take some swings. That is one of the things that I'm seeing pop out here is like all of the places that are mentioned or some of the places. I mean, a couple of them, I want to say at least 3 of them were pop-ups. There was Little Fish, which was a pop-up, Quarter Sheets, a pop-up, and May Malai, which was also a pop-up in Thai Town. I mean, that's 30% of the new Bib Gourmand editions were pop-ups. And that's because like Los Angeles, I think, really fostered an environment where that was possible. And those restaurateurs were able to take the success of their pop-up, turn it into a brick and mortar, which then puts them in the running for a Michelin. So even though things are tough out there, it still seems like relative to other areas, LA is kind of the land of opportunity.
At least the land of creative opportunity, right? Where people are able, the whatever it is about the ecosystem in LA and the way the city has developed over the last decade or so in terms of a culinary destination, I think has generated, like young talent seems to be able to find its foothold in LA for some reason, maybe more easily than other cities. I don't have as deep of knowledge of the Bay Area or New York, for example, but there just is like an energy, I think, of that, like I said, just below or maybe a step or two below your fine dining white tablecloth where really interesting food is getting made.
Let's talk about the actual stars, okay? So, we talked about Holbox, right? I think that Holbox is a really interesting one because they have been Bib Gourmand for a long time. Right. You wonder what took them to the next level, right? Exactly. That was going to be the point or the question I was going to pose you was, so they've been Bib Gourmand for a while. I think a lot of people would look at Holbox and be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. They're doing really cool things. They're probably on par with some of the places on Bib Gourmand. What did they do to go to that next level of 1 star? Well, I don't know. I mean, in part, this is difficult to gauge because Michelin is so secretive about its process and the people who eat at the restaurants or how much they eat, how many times they eat at the restaurant. So no, I think it's impossible to answer this. It speaks to the subjectivity of these awards to some extent. I don't know. We can ask Roberto if he tried anything to step it up this year. I hadn't heard of anything in particular, but I think it just generally speaks to, this is a behind closed doors endeavor. Who knows why Nanaka got docked a star, for example. Yeah. And so, don't know the answer. Interesting decision, I get, and one that we celebrate, but it just makes me wonder again, as we've harped on so many times, what the real criteria and decision-making process is behind some of these decisions. Yeah, it was really interesting. I think it was in Stephanie Brajo's piece for the LA Times. I think she said, we reached out to Michelin about their process and where how often the judges dined, and they declined to basically tell us that. You think you'd have an answer for that as a company like Michelin?
Well, I don't. I think part of the mystique is that they don't, right? I think part of the idea is that they, in the name probably of anonymity, and I'm trying to keep it as fair as possible. Maybe they really keep it close to the chest, which is, I mean, I don't have an issue with that necessarily. I should say, like, I like learning about the processes behind how decisions get made, both by media outlets who are covering restaurants like the LA Times is Taco 101, right?
Yeah.
Where they really went into detail. That was really cool. But I think while it makes you like have some like squinty eyes at it, like where you go like, huh, why is it why is this the award this time around versus others? I think it's the nature of the enterprise.
I think it requires like a really high degree of trust.
Yeah.
From consumers, right? Which they've earned over like decades and decades of doing this. But like, it could be just one dude. It could literally be just one dude because they don't tell us anything.
Bro, is it you? Be honest. Twice. No, that's right. Yeah, but again, this is part of this is. I mean, Michelin has the brand and, like I said, mystique at this point where they don't have to. They kind of have like the cachet to keep their stuff behind closed doors, at least for now. And so you always wonder. I mean, you posed a question in our agenda. Jordan Kahn really seeming like the Michelin whisperer here now with two different restaurants with stars. Are they both 2 stars, or Meteora has 1 and Vespertine has 2?
Dude, Meteora has 1 star. Vespertine has 2. And I think Destroyer, his like other restaurant, maybe Bib Gourmands. I need to fact check that. So listeners, don't go out and tweet that, okay? If you're still tweeting. But yes, Jordan Kahn seems to be the Michelin whisperer. And the funny thing about that is that both Vespertine and Meteora, when it comes to like general like conversation and chatter around those restaurants, neither of those restaurants are ones that people particularly like. I'm talking about mostly people like everyday diners or certain journalists that don't belong to like the upper echelon of journalists, that are more sort of like the like, wow, that sounded like a complete dick.
Yeah, careful now.
What I mean is like they're journalists that are more like not critics, but like people who are out there reporting on stuff, right? Not trying to like literal journalists, not critics, okay? People who are just out there and telling me like, I like this versus I don't like this, right? Fuck, I've dug myself into a hole.
Well, I was going to say The Infatuation more recently did a negative review of Vespertine, right? Which is a good example of that, like from the perspective of a maybe average / casual diner where Vespertine sits. I also wonder, I mean, something that I have in mind is, I mean, really, Hyoto, of course, and I think was near the top of the LA Times 101. Vespertine was Jay Gould's last #1 overall. So they certainly get the recognition from the city, but they don't have chatter, I feel like, around them the way like a Horses did when it was coming up, or Safi's. I remember hearing about Safi's a bunch. Could just be my crew, right? The people that I interact with, but it seemed like or Anajac, right? Those kinds of they don't seem like restaurants that are necessarily top of mind when people talk about places they love in LA.
Yeah,
because I mean, of course, they're like exclusive experiences, right?
Yeah.
They're like once a year, if that you go and experience them. I just think that's an interesting dynamic, and it makes it cool when I guess Michelin pulls them out and recognizes them.
Well, no, does it make it cool, or does it actually like raise some questions? What I mean by that is like, yeah, you bring up the Infatuation review of Vespertine. They also reviewed Meteora and didn't like it either. I think it got like a 6.8 or something, right? It was kind of like, I forget exactly what the theme of the review was, but it was basically like, this restaurant is giving Tulum, but like on the plate is like space, and it doesn't make any sense. And like, in general, like some people go there and are really impressed, but for the most part, what I've heard is like, it's kind of weird, and it doesn't really like hit when you go there. And Vespertine, similarly, which is why I'm so excited to make you pay for it when we go. It's kind of apropos that the Olympics are on right now, because what this reminds me of is like gymnastics scoring, right? It's like the judges are looking for very particular things that the general public is not. And the really, really good gymnasts know exactly how to work those judges. Like if you look at Simone Biles, right? She knows that she has room for making certain mistakes in her routine,
right? Because
her degree of difficulty is so high. She's going to score really high on difficulty, and therefore she can do like an extra hop and not stick the landing necessarily. Dude, Jordan Kahn is kind of like the Simone Biles of our dining scene, I think. He understands what the judges are looking for, and he doesn't have to stick the landing because his degree of difficulty is so high. And you know how you mentioned Jonathan Gold, put him number one? Well, even in that whole write-up, Jonathan Gold was like, I don't even know if I like this. He didn't actually say that, but it was the energy. He was like, I don't even know if I like this, but this is the most ambitious restaurant Los Angeles has right now.
Right. Yeah. So I would say that. I mean, that's an interesting cross cultural comparison. First of all, I'd say, and I imagine. Well, I don't know if this is true or not. Jordan Kahn isn't pursuing what he pursues at either Meteora or Vespertine for Michelin stars. He just has a particular interest and way of creative expression with his food. I don't know. You're making a face. I don't know if we're not in his head. We can't make that leap. And I think so. When I say it's interesting that, or maybe helpful that Michelin pulls out a restaurant that might not be top of mind in the narrative of the city of Los Angeles without that recognition in the same way, is because it is kind of helpful when an authority comes in and says, hey, by the way, this place in your city is trying really hard stuff. Yeah, it might not be for everybody, but I think that's a worthwhile way to help or to educate us, right, and people who enjoy going out about what is happening in their backyards.
Yeah, but the sort of like assumption you're making is that when you say Michelin is saying this, you're saying like the judges, and the assumption there is that the judges are people who are dining out all over the world in other countries, like, and sort of comparatively say, hey, by the way, compared to like fine dining out there, these people are trying something interesting. Because there's no transparency around that, we don't know that to be true.
Right.
And frankly, when you look at how other awards function, it's all very regional. It's like whoever lives there goes and reviews those places. So like maybe they're doing it against a set of criteria, which by Michelin standards means that Vespertine and Meteora are scoring really high. But I don't know that we can definitively say, compared to like some of the other restaurants that get Michelin stars or that are on the world's 50 best, Vespertine is at that level. We just can't say that.
Yeah, I mean, again, these are impossible subjective judgments. And to your point, not knowing the process behind, I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's just regional, maybe reviewers in the US versus Mexico versus Europe and Asia. And therefore, like the criteria, I'm sure they have some rubric, of course, but like who knows how that what it really means for them to compare across the board. I'm really excited for Vespertine now, man. Like with all these questions in mind, we've been to Michelin starred restaurants before in South America. It'll be interesting to compare the experience across the board.
Yeah, I'm actually very excited too. And look, I will say that one person who really sang Vespertine's praises was Chef Santiago Lastra of Cole, who I interviewed at Holbox.
Right.
And yes, he had a little bit of skin in the game because he was doing a collaboration with Chef Jordan Kahn the next night. So it wouldn't have exactly behooved him to trash the restaurant. You know, I made a face earlier when you said, I don't know that Chef Jordan Kahn is cooking for Michelin stars. Yeah, I made a face because I was like, I think he kind of is, but I think it's more layered than that. I think he's also cooking for his peers. I think he's also trying to impress like the people who are doing similar things to him and being like, yo, we're pushing boundaries in XYZ ways. And based on this very anecdotal evidence of Chef Santiago Lastra, it appears that he's succeeding in that. So it'll be interesting to go with that frame of mind when we're going there, as opposed to just being like, I don't like the taste of this reindeer penis.
I will like say it's cool that Chef Kahn is in LA though.
Yeah.
Right. It's cool to have that as part of our environment. And it's even cooler maybe that LA on the West Coast, or at least in California, we can say is a standby for Bib Gourmand recognition as well, right? I like that's almost the one I value more if I'm trying to gauge like the overall health of a city's like restaurant landscape per se, versus like having like two great restaurants and a bunch of like, you know, not as ambitious or creative places beneath it. So it's cool that he's in the city. I can't wait to eat his food.
Dude, no, LA is, I think, as vibrant as hell right now. Like literally with all these Bib Gourmands, all of the 1 stars and whatnot. Also, we've seen how the Bib Gourmands can like sort of work their way up to become 1 stars too, as Holbox did. Like, and obviously Michelin is not the only like measure of how vibrant a dining scene is. This is more like further proof of how vibrant things are. And it's a really exciting time to be eating in LA. The one thing I wanted to sort of ask though, is that a thing that Michelin did earlier this year in May, which I really appreciated, was that they gave a star to a Mexico City taqueria, not Bib Gourmand. They gave them a literal star. And this isn't a Holbox taqueria where you go and you have like an omakase or a tasting menu, right? This is like run-of-the-mill taqueria where, yes, they've got a brigade system and it's a bit more like elaborate, but like no bullshit, it's a taqueria. It's not fine dining. This is like street food, right? And they gave them a Michelin star. Now, I would love to see that in Los Angeles. Like there are places I think that deserve that and but are at the level of like a taqueria or street food. For example, May Malai, who was just mentioned as a Bib Gourmand or just got Bib Gourmand recognition. That's the type of place that when you go there, I'm like, this is on another level. And that's a place I could see one day punching for a Michelin star. And that's what I would really like to see in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously don't disagree. I mean, but the question then still remains, like, what was it about this particular taqueria versus others versus the options we have in LA that are at the level of like more street food or mom and pop shop that made it stand out? I think people were like kind of, I've even seen like follow-up reviews of that being like, not sure why this was the one necessarily, right?
Yeah. That's a great point. It is like, it was almost like a statement, right? It was a statement star that like a taqueria can receive this. And the question was, why this one? But I think those statements are important.
No, I think it is too. It was also the first time they had done stars and in Mexico, correct? So maybe as part of their inaugural list, they were like, hey, we want to like send the message that as we continue in the country, we're not going to be looking only at, you know, the M's of the world or the Puyols that they it's like you said, like a statement in a sense. But it is weird when you look across like because this is a very, I mean, it's 3 levels of ranking. There's Bib Gourmand, but the 3 stars are there, right? And so it becomes somewhat confusing, not confusing, but you like try to read between the lines of who's at particular levels and be like, Nanaka is at the same level as a taqueria in terms of the star ranking. What does that mean, right? Or like what do we take away from that?
I do appreciate that they give thought into retaining stars. That it's not just like you get one and you've got one, or you get 2 and you've got 2. Like you've got to keep doing whatever it was that got you those stars. So I appreciate that they do that. Again, I just wish that there was more transparency. But speaking of 3 stars, we do have a 3-star restaurant here in Southern California, Addison, down in San Diego. I think that should be one of our future bets.
I love that. Yeah, I have no idea anything about Addison, but why not have an excuse to go down to San Diego, try it out? We can find an excuse to make one of us pay for it.
Yeah, I don't think you've been to San Diego too many times, but from what I recall, you had a pretty good time when you did go.
Yeah, I went down for my college senior week, so it was a party. I was in Mission Beach for a weekend there, and it was fucking awesome. But it wasn't like San Diego proper, right? It was just like a party beach weekend that I remember vaguely.
Not a whole lot of Michelin star dining, I guess.
I do not think so, no.
All right. Well, look, speaking of fine dining, Pete Wells, who recently announced that he was going to be hanging up his notes app as the critic of the New York Times after 12 years, he published his final essay as critic. And it was sort of like a reflection on how restaurants have changed over the last 12 years that he's been doing the job. And, you know, it was in the lead, it was in the headline, but basically like the change is not for the better, in his own words. He's basically decrying the changes that have made the experience more impersonal. It really comes down to. Specifically, he starts off calling out a service by the app Blackbird, where you can basically take care of your bill on an app so you can just dip at the end of a meal without waiting for the check. He then goes on to talk about how like all the restaurant experience sort of feel the same because there are these sort of like tasting menus, which are designed to not really have you come again, but are really kind of like a one and done, where you're going to be there one time and therefore the restaurant kind of just wants to give you something to Instagram or put on TikTok and then sort of just like move along. And it sort of like loses this personal aspect of dining. I was reading this, Saul, and, you know, it kind of like gave me the douche bumps in the same way that some of those taste articles give me. Do you know what I mean?
Douche bumps? Is that what you said?
Yeah. Have you never heard that?
I've never heard of douche bumps.
I teach you so much.
I know exactly what you mean right away. This was an interesting piece because it was hard to track the thesis, right? Which, yes, sure, part of it was like there were just a lot of ideas in it, mostly tied around this like impersonality in the restaurant experience, right? With, you know, delivery apps and like screens where you just check out or like pay ahead of time. But I don't know. I felt like like fine dining used to just be like French and Italian white tablecloth, right? Where like it's in a much stronger place in terms of diversity now. That's one. it was an interesting observation. I thought the most insightful piece, though, was more when he was talking about less how restaurants are doing their business, but how people are consuming restaurants, right? He has a couple paragraphs. People who consume a steady diet of bucket lists and viral videos rush from one restaurant to another, so they post about it to prove they were there. They go places solely so they can put a photo of the viral egg sandwich or rainbow bagel on Instagram. Whether the sandwich or bagel tastes good is irrelevant. The point is to prove they were there, and most of these people will never return. Like, I think that's like a more interesting insight, or like I mean, and we've talked about it before. We see people discussing it. You are, of course, a strong participant in the culture.
Part of the problem, yeah.
Part of the problem. And I thought that line was interesting. But with the impersonality of experience at restaurants, it didn't hit quite the same way. Certainly calling out Blackbird and like the reservation game. So it is now like, yeah, that's not great. And I do think there's an overall. It was more almost a commentary, whether he meant it intentionally or not, at how society and social dynamics are changing more broadly. Yeah. It's kind of like, get off your iPhones, people.
Yeah.
But I mean, I didn't mind it. Just a weird note to end on for Pete.
I think he meant that. I think he meant that part. Like, I don't think that was like a subconscious thesis. I think he was definitely like trying to like weave it into a bigger societal trend. I don't know, man. Have you ever noticed how like when people get to the end of their careers, they start to get more pessimistic?
Huh. Have I noticed that? I don't know. I don't know that I have.
I'll give you a really personal example, okay? Which we don't typically do on this podcast. But my grandfather was a missionary. He moved to Naples when he was 18 years old from Michigan to be the first Baptist missionary in Italy, right?
Wait, I did not know this. This is great Luca lore right here.
You didn't know this? No, dude.
No, I did not.
It's crazy shit. Like, it's really crazy. In fact, it was like post World War II. So it was like post Mussolini Italy, right? And actually, I think Catholicism was the only allowed religion. So he would actually hold church services in chicken coops so as not to be discovered. And, you know, he went on to have a great career in terms of like, you know, churchhood in Italy, and was widely regarded as like, you know, the sort of like Baptist guy in Italy. And his whole mission was this whole like, you know, let's make the world a better place through like Christianity, which we can definitely take issue with, you know, I personally do, but you know, that was fundamentally his mission, was like, let's make things better, right? And there was an optimism in that, right? There was like, things can get better. Dude, a few years before he passed away at the end of his career, he gave this like really depressing talk where he was like, the world's never going to get better. He was just like, he didn't say this because he was really just mad, but the sort of message was, we're fucked. The world's never going to get better. And all we can do is just like take care of number one, basically. I was like, yes, that's wisdom. That is wisdom. That's kind of what this entire Pete Wells piece reminded me of, right? It was like, I think he went into this thinking like, oh, this is so exciting. Dining is so exciting. And who knows what it can become. And then it becomes something completely different from what you thought it was going to become. And now he's tapping out. And the only thing he can do is sort of be like, this is shit. It's always going to be shit. It's never going to be better, you know?
I don't know if he went that far. He certainly did not have an optimistic note really in the piece. Look, you might just be describing like a human tendency to like become old man shaking their fist at cloud, or the young people. Like my dad, as he got older, in the business he started, was like, these Gen Z kids, man, or even these millennials. He's like, yeah, what are your peers doing, man? They don't want to work. And I was like, I don't know. So I think it was probably just like something standard about that. I do wish he had ended maybe on a more like optimistic note, because there is a lot to be optimistic about. And I'm not sure certainly the trend he's identifying is a real one, but kind of it reminded me a little bit of that taste piece we read, where it was like the best restaurant in town is like the neighborhood deli or whatever, where the people know you, right? One of the key ideas in that piece, pretentious though it was that the places that are actually most meaningful for people to go out and eat are the ones where they have relationships with the people making the food, or like are known. I think that's like it's a real. I mean, I experience that all the time. Still, I don't think it's a thing that's missing. Maybe for like Pete Wells, the reviewer, and also the people who follow and frequent the kinds of restaurants that get reviewed in the New York Times, maybe like that is a much more observable trend. But I don't. Well, maybe I'm wrong, but I hope it's not a completely lost quote unquote art here, that people like have those interpersonal dynamics still, probably and almost certainly at a rate less than it used to be. But I don't know. That's just like times change.
Times change. Yeah, talk about douche bumps with that taste piece. Now, look, I think the thing is, like, what he kind of doesn't account for is that maybe today more than in previous eras, it's a two-way street. Like, you kind of get in from a restaurant what you put into it. It's not just like you have to go there and be treated like a regular. You kind of have to become a regular in this day and age. Like, you have to go back. You have to patronize them. You have to get to know the people. And that is part of the restaurant experience, but also a really important part of the restaurant experience that I don't think has changed and I don't think will ever change is the fact that these people are creating spaces where you can go with other people and create community with those people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And like when we go to like a restaurant, you and me, yeah, sometimes we have funny banter with like the waiter, right? Or the service person.
Sometimes you do, buddy. You like jump into a stand-up routine all of a sudden every time the waiter comes by.
It's true. Hey, what's the deal with these taxes? What I mean to say though is that like that's not really what it's about. It's about the people at the table that you're connecting with 90% of the time. And yes, the food obviously like contributes to that. But even so, like what I remember about a lot of our dinners, like for example, some of the favorite dinners I've ever had with you on some of our travels, I'd be hard pressed to remember a single dish, but I remember most of the things we talked about.
Yeah. No, it's real. And to your very point, I mean, I don't even know if you necessarily need to become a regular, right? The choice for how to engage with the people who are providing you service is like you can do that, right? I always feel like I never want to like put emotional labor on wait staff, right? So that's why I don't like necessarily engage as closely. But like being polite and having those interactions, that's not gone away, right? Like there are certainly different ways to experience a restaurant, but that's still there. People still have, like as he alludes to, like fights and break up and laugh at the table at a restaurant. That hasn't gone away still. And so I do think like it's a little bit of shaking your fist at cloud a little. Like, I mean, again, the way people interact with each other and with service certainly has evolved over time. That's real. It's interesting that he chose this topic to sign off on, I guess.
Even Bill Addison, right? Like when he's talking about the state of LA food and he's done like, articles on that, they're always optimistic. Yes, they talk about like negative things, but like I just genuinely was a little taken aback by how dour this piece is. Of course, dear listener, put a pin in this for 12 years down the line when we're recording our final episode and we're talking about how fucked the industry is, because that will inevitably happen.
These new influencers don't even count the number of tacos they eat. What are they doing? No, we'll come up with our own grumpy old man takes eventually. But no, I mean, it is what it is. I would have preferred something that taught me more about like New York, I guess, and food in New York and some reflections on those lines. Again, I mean our friend Bill Esparza, I think, would maybe be, nodding his head along reading this piece because it the subtext is like influencers are ruining things. And so I see that there. But another thing I thought was interesting real quick was how he noted that even some restaurants are trying not to go viral because of this tendency that their business gets like overwhelmed and then people get bored and go away, which I just thought was that's a interesting thing to touch on. I didn't know that per se, but no, overall,
no, I agree. That was an interesting one.
I didn't know that. Yeah. But overall, P. Wells, thank you for your service, I guess.
Yeah. Now the question becomes, who will replace him? Speaking of replacing somebody in an important job, candidate Kamala Harris has announced her vice presidential, her running mate?
Running mate,
looking for. It's Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, and as always happens, every outlet in the world is looking for some sort of coverage angle on the running mate. Amy McCarthy and Jaya Saxena of Eater found one basically exploring the question of, is Tim Walz a foodie?
Yeah, there was Eater trying to wriggle its way into the broader narrative. But I think there's some legitimate points here for the record.
Yeah, into the algorithm. They were trying to wriggle their way into the algorithm. So basically, his resume points for being considered a quote-unquote foodie are: 1, he established universal free school breakfast and lunch for Minnesota kids, which we like, even though I don't do breakfast myself. Lunch would be very much appreciated. 2, he's helped improve his state's carbon footprint with respect to farming, which we're all about as well. We've talked about sustainability in food at scale, and that definitely seems to be a way to do it. 3rd, and I think this is the most pertinent one for us here on this podcast, is he's raved about his state's quote unquote delicacies. How familiar were you with the delicacies of the state of Minnesota prior to Tim Walz?
I mean, I've heard of the Juicy Lucy, but otherwise, hot dish I was not aware of. I mean, it's cool stuff. Yeah, I love the headline. He just seems like a human who likes food, as a way for Eater to like have an excuse to cover him as like, yeah, sure. Yeah. Like, I suppose so.
So the other specialties. So yeah, there's the Juicy Lucy, which is like a hamburger that's stuffed with cheese as opposed to topped with cheese. There's one that was really kind of took me aback, which was cinnamon rolls with chili, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a bowl of chili with a side of cinnamon rolls for dipping. Not entirely convinced by that one. And then, of course, there's the Minnesota hot dish. So what is the Minnesota hot dish? Well, it's a casserole of sorts. It's typically got green beans, bacon, ground turkey, mushrooms, and tater tots. Apparently, Walz has a version that won him the Minnesota Congressional Delegation Hot Dish Off 2 years in a row.
Wow.
He's got my vote, bro.
There you go. Steady competition, I'm sure, in that field. But good for him. Good for Eater for having a piece chime in here. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I guess what they're commenting on is sort of like accessibility, right? Like overall, I guess as a candidate, which is all well and good. Good stuff.
Yeah, no, I actually, hot dish is like a really big deal for Minnesota politicians. It was actually back in 2020, Senator Amy Klobuchar ran for the Democratic presidential nomination, and she made a big deal of like having a hot dish recipe, and it was one of the things that we like to talk about the most on our campaign, which was laughable because she was like killing us in every poll, and we were like, haha, this weird lady, she likes hot dish. It's like,
wow, mudslinging politics around food, man. Look at this. You were a negative influence on our overall food politics. Not a good look. Not a good look.
It's true. That was me. I'm just reforming my ways. Okay. What would be the weirdest food preference you would bring to the table if you were a political candidate?
Oh, this is such a good question.
What's your hot dish?
What's my hot dish? Well, when I was younger, my mom used to make me a sliced banana with cheddar or American cheese on top. Banana cheese. Yeah, I've told you about this before. You made the same face that time. I stand by it. It's actually like fruit with cheese is just a great snack. Banana cheese always hits. I can't believe I'm talking about this. It would probably be the weirdest thing. I don't have like super weird food tastes, I don't think, beyond that. So that'd probably be the one that like gets me kicked out of the race, because I don't know if that one has quite the regional appeal of a hot dish.
Fruit cheese is weird, bro. I mean, no, fruit cheese is normal. Like, let's be clear, figs and cheese, apples and cheese, but it's like refined fruits, the types of fruits that are picked up in like wine tasting notes. It's not banana.
Yeah, I don't know how this happened. Again, this is just like I blame my mom. She just made it, and I liked it, and it followed me probably through college. I haven't had a plate of banana cheese in a while, but it's real.
Is it melted on top?
No. It's a cold dish. Again, you just like slice up some cheese, put it on like little cubes of cheese or whatever, and put it on the banana, and it's a great combo. I don't know how to explain it.
I mean, with apple, there's like a textural contrast. This is all just like mush.
I mean, yeah, it is for sure all mush. And also, I think a key thing is, well, I mean, figs are sweet too, but apple is like tart and cheese is often like sweet, and so they complement. But yeah, I don't know. It just works. You asked me the question, I answered it. I have no further comment.
and there's no like regional specialty from like Princeton specifically?
Dude, I think it was like baby food, dude. Just kind of like, and I was like, this is dope. I'm sticking with it, even as I got older.
I feel like okay, well, we'll get there in a second, because actually the last article I want to talk about today is an epic series that Eater's doing it's called No Taste Like Home, and it's basically a series of articles looking at the stories of iconic regional dishes. There are two LA inclusions. One is a piece on how Nobu Matsuhisa, the guy behind Nobu and Matsuhisa, engineered dishes like his famous black cod that really define what we think of as Japanese cuisine in America today. There's also a piece on the boiling crab, which has locations in Koreatown and in the San Gabriel Valley, which has played a big part in sort of like bringing Viet Cajun flavors to the fore. I mean, I thought this was an excellent series, but it really got me thinking about like what other foods from LA, yes, could have been included in this, but also what I would have brought to the table if I were trying to like tell the story of a food from my hometown. Are you telling me that there's nothing from Princeton, New Jersey?
Oh, for sure there is. I mean, I don't know how much Princeton can particularly own this, although to be fair, Viet Cajun originated on the Gulf Coast in Louisiana, so I don't know where they draw particular lines here, but like for Jersey, it's like the insane hoagie, right? Stuff with like French fries, chicken tenders, hamburger patties. Hoagie Haven in Princeton, I think, would be like carry the banner for our regional cuisine. I think we own it. Certainly, like other cities like Pittsburgh and across the East Coast, like have a similar sandwich vibe. But I think Jersey can lay claim to like the Fat Sal's kind of hoagie, you know, that's like super extra, and was certainly a hit among high school kids when I was growing up.
Why are you not more into that?
I mean, I have like a simpler. I think you know this about me. I don't like mixing a bunch of shit. Like I'm like I'm a food segregationist. I want like my stuff is all separate. And it was always a little bit too much. I want to like understand what's going into my mouth, and Hoagie Haven often confused me and overwhelmed me. But I didn't dislike it though.
That is going to be. If you think that's not going to be clipped, you got another thing coming.
So that would be Jersey. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious what. So interesting. Seattle, they had a drive-through espresso and coffee shops as their Pacific Northwest cuisine. Yeah, that originated up here, which I think is kind of cool. I guess
that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah, I was a little bit just interested that like Nobu and Viet Cajun cuisine were the LA/Southern California representatives. Maybe not what comes to mind.
I mean, I think the obvious one would be like the taco, right? And I'm not talking about like the street, like the Mexican taco, like that Bill Esparza, you know, waxes lyrical about. I'm talking about like the Taco Bell style taco, which was literally like,
oh yeah, the hard taco. Yeah,
which is probably like the most like closely associated like American taco, right? And that was literally born out in like the San Gabriel Valley, I want to say, in the Inland Empire at a place called Mitla Cafe, which they were doing sort of like the OG like ones. I don't think they invented them, but they certainly made a version which inspired the future owner of Taco Bell to open a business around them, which is obviously, I mean, that's probably like the most successful Mexican-ish restaurant in the entire country, right? Taco Bell?
Yeah, I mean, from obviously like an overall maybe like chain perspective, yeah, I would say so. Yeah, that's a great shout. That to me actually speaks more to it, and it seems more like seems more in the spirit of some of the other cuisines that they pulled out. But it's just fundamentally a really cool idea for a series, and I'm enjoying reading these articles.
Yeah, if I were to do one from my hometown, and I have a hard time defining my hometown, but I'll talk about it in terms of like Zurich, Switzerland, where I spent my like high school years. I'd talk about the doner kebab, which is like obviously like got Turkish roots, right? But there's a very specific like Swiss version, which was brought over by like Turkish immigrants. And instead of being like in a piece of bread, it's like basically in a burrito. And it's got a very specific like set of sauces that they use, which appeal to the Swiss palate. And that was like the thing that we grew up eating. And it was awesome. Probably not as iconic as some of these other foods mentioned, but certainly tugs on the heartstrings.
Yeah, I mean, what's really cool about this too is it speaks to the cultural melting pot, I guess, that the U.S. is, because so many of these cuisines are from I think immigrant communities, right, from outside the U.S. that are then brought and transformed, evolved, and become reflective of our regional taste, which I think is really cool.
Bro, have you done boiling crab?
I have not. I think I've stopped in there, but I don't know if I actually ate anything. I think it was like meeting someone briefly, maybe for drinks, but I've been by it a ton of times in Koreatown. Always looks really good.
That's a fun one. That's a really fun one. If you ever like have a free night in LA, when if one day you ever live here, then I think that is definitely something we should do. I will say one of the funniest things about boiling crab is it's so successful. Like there's always a line outside, and it spun off a bunch of like copycats, right? And a lot of those copycats tried to use punny names, right? And for example, there was one called Holy Crab for a while that was like kind of successful, but then they just started getting lazier and lazier with puns as like future copycats sprung up. And there's literally one on a corner somewhere in Koreatown called Oh My Crab. every time I drive, I'm like, that's not even a pun, guys. That's literally not even a pun.
I love that. I love that a lot. That actually would probably charm me and win me over, because I love the sort of nonsensical. Yeah. And by the way, folks who want to learn more about vegan Cajun cuisine, Ugly Delicious, great episode Dave Chang did, exploring the tension between like the new Cajun style versus traditional Cajun, I think, style of doing crawfish boils, which I think is really cool.
How dare you plug a David Chang property on this podcast? By the way, did you see his interview at Food and Wine in Aspen?
Oh, wait, no, I didn't.
He gave an interview and he touched on some of the chili crunch stuff. I know that like he likes to sort of pride himself on not being media trained, but it was the most media trained shit I've ever heard.
Well, he's been talking about it for a while now. He did like an interview or like a mea culpa on his podcast explaining the situation. I will say what remains one of my favorite things about Dave Chang, which I actually forgot to mention when we talked about him. I don't know why I'm just like yet again on his dick on this podcast. but you got to give credit. Dave Chang, I think, like tries to be accountable like in pretty real ways. I find, like, sure, this was a media trained interview at this point, but when he had the podcast in the immediate response to the chili crisp thing, it reminded me like this guy likes to be transparent and own up a lot. And that's kind of also, I forgot like what made me like him in the first place, was that he's willing to acknowledge his own mistakes and try to fix them, which I think is cool. I'll check out this interview, but I'm guessing I've heard a lot of the points he's going to make.
Yeah, you definitely have. I just think when you're having to be in a position as often as he is, where he has to own up and be accountable, you kind of got to start asking, am I the problem?
To be fair, I think part of this is that he has asked that. I don't know. It's just like it's a personality trait that I always respect when people are willing to own their shit. So shout out to Dave Chang for that.
And to be clear, Mr. Chang, if you do hire us on Major Domo Media, we will erase all of these aspects of the podcast. We'll go back, delete them retroactively. We'll scrub them out. Never existed. Saul, you put in the agenda as our last thing here that the series reminded you of an infuriating interview with Tom Holland?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the Taste Like Home series, which is about celebrating American regional cuisine and like exploring its roots, much of it from like immigrant communities, like I said, some of it like truly like I think like fundamentally American. There was this interview clip from Tom Holland I think it's like a super old now, but he's like making this point where there's like no such thing as American food, and they're like, name me American food, and someone's like hamburgers, and he's like from Hamburg, and he's like, someone's like French fries, and he's like French. And I'm like, dude, you don't, like, what are you talking about? Some British bastard putting our name in his mouth? Come on. How can you stand by the cuisine of that, like, completely? Sorry, we don't eat blood pudding, my guy. Like, put some respect on our name, get educated. Tom Holland is an enemy of this podcast.
I don't know. I think those are some pretty good points.
Oh, they're not.
You have this, like, you have some personal vendetta against British food, my dude.
I guess I do. Yeah, it's good to have enemies. What are we doing here, guys? Like, the best food in your country is like from outside the country. Let's be real. And also, I think it's like America, maybe even more so than, like, sure, like chicken tikka masala is a British invention, right? But like, he didn't like Texas barbecue. Come on, like, what are we talking about here? Like the Juicy Lucy. Hamburg didn't come up with the Juicy Lucy, man. It may be a hamburger, but they
sure as fuck didn't come up with the hot dish. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, the hot dish. Come on, we got numbers. There's American food. Don't try to, like, be holier than thou from your crappy island.
Sincerest apologies to the 2% of listeners who come from the UK. That's a real stat, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Respect. I stand by it. Whoever you guys are, you try to prove us wrong, but please.
Those are RFK numbers.
Okay. So we opened the pod comparing ourselves to Fox News and with the comparison to RFK. We're doing great, buddy.
Except we have never planned to eat a bear. and that's on God.
Is that what happened there? Let's not get into it right now. But I heard the bear controversy. He wanted. Okay, let's not get into it. Yeah, we have.
I am saying it is tangentially food related, so we may need to discuss it at some point.
I suppose it is. Although, I mean, look, be real, man. Would you eat bear if it was on the menu at like Bestria?
100%.
You would.
I mean, is it even a question? Would you?
Of course. I get whenever there's like a weird ingredient on a menu, I want to check it out. I suppose there's a difference between, delivered by the chefs at Bestia versus trying to home cook some bear cub. let's get off this topic.
Look, you come here for food, but we're giving you political analysis as well. Okay, look, let's close this. Just in case, you've already front loaded this, but do you have a shitty Yelp review of the week?
Not. I mean, that was a pretty good one, revealing Emily's ailments. I think that qualifies. I'm trying to think. We went on a hike this weekend on the Oregon coast. I was kind of grumpy the whole time, but I was still a good boyfriend. Like I think I tried to be at least. I was engaged.
That's good. Wait, you got engaged?
No, I was engaged as a person. Just went on a grumpy hike, got engaged.
I was like, were you grumpy before or after you got engaged? Because that's a real question.
No, I tried to not. I was grumpy at the situation, not at Emily. So I hope that's good. But otherwise, no, been solid. I haven't done trivia with VJ yet. That's next week, so I have to follow up on my story from last week. Yeah, it's big. It's big for me,
dude. The more I listened to that story, the more I was like, he is in the throes of toxic masculinity.
Literally, it was a sister. It was like a spiritual sister to the story you told about like the soccer game, right, where you didn't get picked for the A team, right? We have this competitive drive in us. By the way, I also always beat BJ at beer pong. I forgot to mention that last time, so I just want to know. And
wouldn't know what that's like. I don't really have a shitty Yelp review of the week this week. The only thing I can think of is like, we didn't really have plans last weekend. And so I was like, I basically made my wife eat 3 tuna sandwiches because I'm working on a tuna sandwich list. But like, there's worse things in life than being force-fed tuna sandwiches.
Yeah, come on. I mean, I'd be thrilled. You know me with my tuna. Yeah. No, we've just been good partners. I like it.
Yeah, it's all fun until the mercury poisoning hits.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I've eaten a lot of tuna in my life, and not like on more than one occasion I've been like, low key, how much mercury is in my body overall. Like, that's accumulated since fucking high school when it was my daily lunch. Anyway,
tuna sandwiches, banana and cheese. This conversation has really gone off the rails. So we are going to bring it back on the rails with part 2 of our interview with Heather Sperling, the co-owner of Botanica, right after the break. Thanks, Father Saul. Good job by you.
Good job, buddy.
Dear listener, my wife recently decided to start eating meat after more than 15 years of being a vegetarian, and being the conscientious consumer that I am, I've been looking for ways to make our household's meat consumption as high quality and sustainable as possible. That's why I'm absolutely thrilled to have found First Light Farms, a small collective of passionate family farmers in New Zealand who are quietly changing the world. Not only are they producing the most tender, rich, and succulent Wagyu beef money can buy, but you can rest assured that First Light's cattle were raised as nature intended, living it up on lush pasture, eating a 100% grass diet with absolutely no grains, no animal byproducts, and no feedlots. The result is the best tasting meat in the game, full of natural marbling and packed with omega-3 fats. If you've ever enjoyed a meal at Ma2 in Beverly Hills, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Ma2 famously sources all of its meat directly from First Light, and the good news is that you too can have First Light Farms meats delivered straight to your door. All you have to do is visit www.firstlight.farm, where you can buy their meats and also sign up for their members-only steak club. Members of the steak club enjoy tons of benefits, including monthly shipments of steaks, access to the highest marble score meats, and, this is my favorite part, access to First Light's full library of proprietary recipes and techniques. Also, you can cook the perfect steak within the comfort of your own home. Buying good steak isn't easy, and it isn't cheap. First Light delivers the highest quality at an incredible deal, and now that I've seen the light, I'm never going back. Visit www.firstlight.farm to learn more and use the code LAFood10 for a 10% discount on your first order.
To state the obvious for most independent restaurants, if not all, this is not something that people go into for profit. They don't go into it for the margins. They don't go into it to make a huge amount of money and then retire off of it. They go into it for a totally different set of reasons. I like to talk about how essential it is to have your own metrics of success. And as a woman in the restaurant industry who is not coming out of a traditional career trajectory, who doesn't have a resume that most people can glance at and say, oh, she worked at this restaurant and this restaurant, this restaurant, and I like those or respect those, so I'm going to go here.
Yeah.
As someone who's coming at it from a different angle and someone who's, poured her full self into this, and also someone who has set up a pretty different schedule for myself. Again, like I said, I work largely Monday to Friday, so that I can be with my kids on the weekends. I'm constantly having to remind myself of those metrics of success. But I think that concept is so true for anyone who runs an independent restaurant, because you can't gauge your success by your profit margin. You can't gauge your success based on reviews or media, or accolades. You have to decide what it is how you measure your success. I think, for us, it's really about the impact that we're able to have, the impact we're able to have on our community and our economy and on our people. And that's why many people go into this business. And that's the only way to last in this business, is by having that be what matters most. Yeah. I have no idea how I got on that tangent, but I swear it came from something.
You were talking about South Stars and why you,
oh, yes. Yeah. You had asked what from my previous lives and careers had led to this. Yeah, it really was that strong sense of conviction and knowing that what I was going to build had the potential to have a really positive impact. Not in a huge global way. I'm not solving any big world problems here, but I had this sense that if I can make this work, it would be making my own little corner of the world a little better by creating a safe and lovely and supportive place to work, by putting money into the hands of really good people doing really important work, farmers, producers, other small businesses around the city, and by also being an unbelievable creative outlet. Everything that I had seen and done and heard and thought about before just gave me an understanding of what this could be. And that then really created the conviction that I, needed to raise $1 million, oversee a multi-month full gut renovation and re-permitting of an old liquor store in a city where I'd only lived for a year. And, all of the things that it takes to birth something like this.
We had Eddie Navarrete recently on the podcast, and I've recently learned how much harder it is to open a restaurant in a space that was not previously a restaurant. So my throat just sank to my stomach. Is that a saying? That's just what I felt right now when you said you had to re-permit everything.
It's unbelievable. It's the barrier to entry is really dismayingly high. And we persevered, obviously, but throughout the whole crazy process of neighborhood council and zoning administrator approvals and Department of Building and Safety snafus and quagmires, my heart was just breaking for all of the people with the passion and the vision who just didn't have the time or the money to push through the clusterfuck of red tape and bureaucracy and costly permitting and administrative bric-a-brac that you have to navigate to get a restaurant open in this city. But thankfully, plenty of people keep doing it, but it does make me worry for the future.
No, it literally seems like the most impossible endeavor. I think about this regularly now. Just whenever I see a restaurant opening, I'm like, oh my God, God bless you, Yeah,
no, the amount of work that it took to get there, and also the amount of vision and conviction of a small group of people that it took to push through, to raise the money, to develop the concept, you have to have such strong vision to push through all of this.
Yeah.
To then create a business that, if you're lucky, ekes out a 5% profit annually, which you're going to use to reinvest in your business, maybe pay back some investors. I will say the people in this industry and restaurant owners especially, and I can say this as one myself, but also, knowing dozens and dozens across this country, they are such good people. They are, for the most part, obviously there are exceptions, but for the most part, they are really, really benevolent, caring, deeply hospitable people to do this work.
I want to talk more about Botanica and what it's like to actually eat here, but this seems like a perfect entry point into some of the other work you've been doing recently. You talk about making an impact, and I think you have really been making an impact more broadly than just Botanica. Obviously you're involved and you're a co-founder of Regarding Her, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in addition to that, you've been out there publicly talking about the difficult times that restaurants have been having. You recently wrote an excellent article in the Los Angeles Times that was really insightful and that we spent quite a bit of time talking about on this podcast,
Yes,
actually.
thank you.
I think it would be really valuable to sort of hear from you again how that piece came together, and if you can remind our listeners sort of what the premise of it was.
Yeah. So I wrote an article that broke down how every dollar spent at Botanica is used. So for every dollar that is spent at Botanica, so in the market, coffee, breakfast, lunch, dinner, brunch, catering, all of our revenue that comes in, for each dollar, I broke down where every cent of that dollar goes. And spoiler alert, 1.005 cents goes back out the door. And, Botanica is a very labor heavy model because we have all of these different facets. We have a market, we have a really serious coffee program, we have a serious wine and cocktail program. So our model is the most costly version of a relatively casual neighborhood restaurant. That said, this reality where the vast majority, if not all, the revenue that comes in goes back out the door is totally the reality for so many restaurants across the country. And I knew that from talking to all of the restaurateurs who I'm regularly in touch with via Regarding Her. I knew that from knowing other restaurant owners across the country. And I just felt really compelled to, lift the skirts, so to speak, and say, here's what's going on. Here's what this looks like. Yeah. And if you're interested in restaurants, if you care about restaurants, if you care about independent restaurants who are sourcing thoughtfully and paying their team fairly, then you might be interested in knowing that this is what the business model is.
Yeah.
And, I was really conscious of writing something that wasn't, too complainy. It wasn't too preachy or wasn't really begging. Of course, the subtext of the article is independent restaurants are having a really hard time.
Yeah.
Please support them, government and diners.
Yeah.
But the way that I wanted to get that message out was just by saying, here's what this business model looks like. I think it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's frightening and perplexing and a little depressing, but it's also just really interesting. Yeah. And I wanted to let people know that when they're spending at a restaurant like Botanica, they're investing in other great businesses and that their dollar is having a real impact on their local economy and on local communities. And so especially post-pandemic, as restaurants after the pandemic and then the strikes in LA, restaurants are still really struggling. I felt compelled to do something to let people know that, when you spend at a restaurant like Botanica, it's not frivolous spending.
Yeah.
That, that cacao date mocha with cashew milk, that's a treat, it's a great treat. And it's also not actually frivolous.
Yeah.
That money is going to support this unbelievable web of producers and workers and other businesses. And the rest of the money that doesn't go to what I call in the article, the good stuff, that goes to, your sales tax that passes through our business, the money that goes to our utilities, that goes to supporting really essential city infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So basically, I feel really confident in saying, and what I think this article was trying to say too, is that every dollar you spend at a restaurant is actually really important.
Yeah.
It's if you want, think of it as a donation to economies, communities, and infrastructure that make your city work, that make your world more delicious, that make your neighborhood filled with, some great people that support other people doing amazing work, and that support, literally the custodians of our earth.
Yeah.
Our farmers who we source from, who are practicing largely regenerative agriculture, are literally the custodians of our earth. The winemakers who we source from, who are all doing organic and biodynamic viticulture and sourcing from, organic and biodynamic agriculture, are doing really essential work for this planet.
Mm-hmm.
There's a carbon footprint with wine. Okay, so maybe I'm overstating it a little bit, but there's a carbon footprint with everything. But really what I wanted to do with this article was say, hey, you can feel good about spending these dollars. LA, I still know just anecdotally through Botanica, we have a huge crew of people in the entertainment industry who are regulars here. I know through them that it's not back. People are stressed about money. People are thinking about changing jobs. This is not obviously like a flush, amazing moment in LA. I wanted to show what it looked like when you passed your dollar through an independent restaurant in your neighborhood. Hopefully to encourage people to feel better about that spending and be a little more thoughtful about it too.
Yeah, well, it's, what you called in the article, the economic term, the multiplier effect, right?
Yes, serious bang for your buck when you give your dollars to a restaurant. And, again, not saying it's every restaurant. There are certainly restaurants out there that do prioritize profit, at the expense of their sourcing, at the expense of their pay. But more restaurants than not are ones that fall into this category of sourcing thoughtfully, paying thoughtfully, and in general being really good citizens and really good local business owners.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really important point to be making now as restaurateurs, because I think what consumers are feeling is they're just seeing prices go up, right? Totally. And there isn't context for it, or at least not to them. They can understand like that, okay, the economy isn't doing so well, like, there's inflation, et cetera, et cetera. But I think even so, you still hear a lot of the discussion centering around it's greed. It's just restaurants greed. Literally, like I posted a list of the best turkey sandwiches the other day or something, and somebody complained about one of the turkey sandwiches being $15 or something. I made some joke about inflation, and they were like, "Yeah, or greed." And I think and I see that happen all the time. So I think that the understanding that you provide with the article is really important. It's like, you guys aren't in here to make greed. Millions. Yeah. No. You're here to survive and to do something good for your community. And right now it's really tough. I actually thought it was really interesting in the article when you were talking about the specific percentages, including the percentages where you thought maybe there was some room for, I don't know, legislative action, let's say. Can you remind me of some of those areas?
Yeah. So the way I broke it down in the article, so like I said, for every dollar spent, $1.005 went back out the door. And Botanica did turn a small profit last year, and that was from other income that came in from outside restaurant operations. That was
photo shoots.
Location fees. We're on all of these location services, so we do photo shoots and film shoots here. And I'm going to be honest, we did one last year that if we could have, we would have said no for ethical reasons. Yeah. It had to do with a company that's involved in cigarettes and vaping. And we would have just hard passed on that if we lived in a world where we made more than a 1% profit. Yeah. But we were like, we are going to take your $13,000, big tobacco, because this when we are going to reinvest it in people who we think are doing good work. So anyway, we did turn a small profit. But not from day-to-day restaurant operations. So the way that I broke it down in the article was by different sort of umbrella categories. And basically 86.7 cents out of that dollar goes to what I call good stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's if you're just coming in here off the street, you live in Silver Lake, you live somewhere in LA, this good stuff is like, things you'd feel good investing in. This is all of our payroll, all of our food, all of our beverage, all of our market goods, all of the other small businesses that help make this work. The people fixing our walk-in evaporator right now, the people who the coffee machine techs. So 86.7 cents out of that dollar goes right back into, the other small businesses, purveyors, producers, and labor.
Yeah, a lot of plants in here, a lot of upkeep, I'm sure.
That's all me too.
Okay.
Yes.
That's good. Well, congrats. Honestly, I can use some tips.
I am our gardener, and then Pierre-Luc, our director of operations, does all of our floral. We all wear many hats, and that's, what makes it so fun, frankly. And then 13.8%, or 13.8 cents rather, in the context of a dollar, goes into the rest, which are, admin fees, which are like our tech suite, accounting, all of our office supplies, our liability insurance, our trash and utilities. Within those categories, there are a couple things that I really wish we didn't have to spend on. And if we could have a couple percentage points or a couple cents on the dollar back, that would totally transform the way this business works. So last year we did about 3.1 million in revenue. And so, we're talking about 3.1 million plus that went back out the door.
Yeah.
And if we could have a couple more percentage points that we kept from, for example, credit card processing fees. So that's 3.1 cents out of every dollar goes to credit card processing. If those were capped at, 2%, that's another 1% of our revenue. That's really would be meaningful. Payroll tax is a huge one. So payroll tax last year, that was 4.89 cents out of every dollar went to payroll tax. And, the thing that's so challenging as a business owner is that as minimum wage goes up, which is great, and I 1,000,000% support, so does our payroll tax burden. So does our workers' comp insurance, because our workers' comp insurance policy is calculated, what we owe, our premiums are calculated based on our payroll. So when we opened Botanica in 2017, minimum wage was $12 an hour. It's now, I think, $17.50, $17.49.
I've had it up to 20, right, or something.
Yes. Yeah. So that's an increase of nearly 40%. And so our payroll tax, tax that we pay federal, it has also increased. There's been no breaks on any of the operating costs. There's just, as costs have gone up, there's just revenue. And again, this is not just a Botanica thing. This is things I'm hearing from people, from restaurant owners who I know across LA and across the country. Costs are going up and up and up, and revenue is staying flat. There's only so much that a restaurant can put back on the diner, but that's our only source of revenue.
Yeah.
And, we're so conscious about a diner's perception of value. And it's really, really hard and nuanced when people are, scoffing at a $15 turkey sandwich. And, I don't expect that a diner should look at that turkey sandwich and immediately think, well, this is paying for X number of staff, and the producer of this turkey who, raises their turkey in a, humane, antibiotic and hormone-free way, and themselves as an employer of this many people. And, and this producer of the bread who, uses local grains and is themselves a, employer of this many people. It's like that calculation doesn't need to happen every time you get a turkey sandwich. For many people, that would take out some of the pleasure from it. But that's certainly what happens every time I think about anything that I'm buying or eating. And frankly, I spend truly profligately on food.
Me too. It's disgusting. My wife makes me take pictures of everything just in case, if I were to look at what I spend on food, it's insane. But honestly, my mind does work like that.
Yes,
I look at something and I'm like, okay, this.
But what's more important? Even if we don't know, we trust. And that goes back to what you were saying about this distrust that can exist. And again, another reason why I wanted to write this article, because as prices are going up and up, as the service charge bill was, sort of stoked these sort of fires of weird distrust of service charge and hidden fees in the restaurant world, because many people genuinely did have that reaction.
Mm-hmm.
That's obviously now been struck down. Restaurants are exempt from the, junk fees bill because restaurants do not have junk fees and never should have been there in the first place. But it really did drive home the fact that there are plenty of diners out there who really do think that there is some element of greed or swindling that's happening in this transaction.
Yeah.
And again, I can't speak for every single restaurant or every single, food business, but I feel pretty confident in saying that 99% of the time there is actually negative greed. It is actually benevolence and hospitality that is the bottom line of this transaction. And if things are priced in a way that feels a little high, there's a reason. But it's really hard because we at Botanica, we cannot charge what we would actually need to charge for the food to make the business work. Instead, we're constantly trying to grow revenue in other streams. We're constantly trying to pivot and be hyper mindful about our spending because we can't just put it all onto the check. People would be turned away. People would say, this is no longer a restaurant where I can come once a week. This restaurant is too expensive. It's too fancy. We're going to save it as a special occasion thing. But then they come in for a special occasion and we're not a fine dining restaurant. And so then maybe they're disappointed. There's just this very nuanced dance, or, really it feels more like a contortionist routine that you have to do as a neighborhood restaurant where, you want to make enough money to pay your people what you want to pay them. You want to make enough money to have, a capital reserve for when your walk-in breaks and when, your other refrigerator is just on its last leg. You want to be able to give your core team raises. Mm-hmm. All of these things are why you need a 3, 4, 5, 6% profit. Forget about repaying your investors, which you also need to do too. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, you need a buffer to be able to keep reinvesting in your business, growing your business, and just keeping your business afloat. But it can't, the reality of restaurants, at least in LA right now, because some cities are different. I was just in New York and restaurants are packed and it feels a little different than LA where things feel a little slower and people feel really cost conscious. Mm-hmm. And so we are just ceaselessly trying to figure out how we can bring in more revenue and minimize our costs without compromising any of our values or our vision.
All we need is one, not all we need, but wouldn't it be nice if just one credit card company was like, let's have a restaurant specific program where we just charge 2% processing fees. They'd probably get a ton of business off of that.
Yes, they would get so much. And so yeah, really in terms of legislative support for restaurant operations, credit card processing fees, anything relating to payroll tax, I mean, these are like total pipe dreams. Yeah. I don't have any expectation that something could happen there. But those are the things that really could move the needle and are sort of the obvious, that's the obvious spend that like really bums me out at the end of every year when I look at the P&L and I'm like, fuck, that's $180,000 that I could have spent on my goddamn team. Mm-hmm. Or a new refrigerator for the line. Like, come on. But I don't know if anything's going to happen there. What could happen is tax incentives. There is a world in which there could be some incentives. There could be some tax credits. There could be, some breaks on the annual costs of doing business that could be passed on the state level. There are things that could slightly lighten the load and also just sort of create a little bit more of an environment of supportive goodwill that could be legislated. I have heard from Eddie specifically that this would have to happen on the state level. Nothing like this is going to happen in LA. Yeah. There are things that could be done that could incentivize people continuing to do this work. And then backing up to, things that could be legislated that could help encourage more people to go into the restaurant business, that's where it feels like there's so much opportunity. So, the two things that I really see as existential threats for the future of neighborhood restaurants are the barrier to entry that exists.
Yeah.
And part of that is that insane tangle of bureaucratic shit that you have to get through to get something open, the insanity of dealing with construction, the insanity of the permitting process, the unbelievably high cost of liquor licenses. I think they're going.
Do you guys serve liquor?
Yeah, we do. And when we bought our license, it was $80,000. So in California, a liquor license is an asset that you have to purchase. In New York, it's liquor licenses are granted by your community council, your neighborhood council. In California, it's actually an asset that you have to purchase. And so when we bought ours in 2016, it was $80,000, but then we had to go through this whole crazy experience with neighborhood councils and the zoning administrator. And we were the first liquor license to be granted in a 2-mile radius. And it was not for lack of effort. We had to go back. It was appealed multiple times. There was a whole teetotaling contingent that fought tooth and nail to prevent it. Anyway, so on top of the cost of the actual license, there's another $25,000 in fees that you have to pay to your expediter, who is a professional who guides you through this quagmire of insanity, and then all of the license transfer and effectuation fees. So that was in 2016. Now the license itself is around $145,000.
Before you get the expediter.
Before the other $20,000-$30,000 of fees. So, when you're thinking about what could be legislated that would make it easier and more enticing for people to open a restaurant, there are things relating to the cost of liquor license. There are things relating to the insane parking requirements that you have to have if you're going to open a restaurant with a liquor license. There are things that can be done for landlords to incentivize them to fill their empty buildings, as opposed to letting them sit there empty until they finally get someone to sign on to their insanely inflated rent rate. There could be incentives for landlords there could be tax credits that they get if they provide, better rent abatement for a restaurant tenant that's coming in and needs to do some work and so needs some time for free rent, or TI, tenant improvement allowance, which is where a property owner actually gives a certain number of dollars per square foot for the improvements that a business is going to make on their space. So for us, we converted this space from a liquor store to a restaurant. So we did mechanical, electrical, plumbing work, not to mention all of the structural stuff. We did a huge amount of structural reinforcement and all of the permitting. So this is now a much more valuable property for our landlords. So they gave us a small tenant improvement allowance, but a lot of landlords, as I've been looking at other spaces to do more projects over the last couple of years, a lot of landlords there's no incentive for them to do that. Yeah. So there could be tax credits or tax breaks that could incentivize landlords. There's so many things that could be done relating to the process that just fast track it. And there is a really amazing program now that has just launched in LA in the last couple of years called the Restaurant Beverage Program, that does enable you to circumvent the insanity of the neighborhood council approval and zoning administrator hearing process for a liquor license. If you're a bona fide eating establishment, if a certain amount of your revenue is going to come from food, if you offer food all of the hours that you're open, et cetera, et cetera. So that is a huge game changer and a huge win. But there are still just so many other costs. And in addition to costs, it's such a lengthy process to open a restaurant if you're going to do any work that requires permitting, and time is money. And so there could and should be a better infrastructure in place to support small business owners who want to do this work, because again, the multiplier effect, the bang for your buck from each dollar spent at a restaurant is so major. It's so you're a really meaningful local employer. You're supporting myriad other local businesses. You're a really essential pass-through for sales tax, which is essential revenue for the city of Los Angeles to exist. And so you would think that there would be more structural support for these really, really key businesses. And aside from just all the role that they play in their local economies, restaurants are also just so essential to communities and to culture. they're so essential to tourism, which again ties back to the sales tax and the economy and tourists coming to stay at hotels and going to museums and all these things. Restaurants just play such an important role in the way that a city works. And it's really crazy that there is not more legislated, structural, enshrined support for people opening them and then people keeping them alive. And, it makes me worried for the future. I see so many people, amazing people from the Botanica kitchen, amazing people who I know from other restaurants too, who have left line cook, sous chef, CDC positions and are now just doing their own thing. And that's great. And I'm psyched for them. And they're doing great work. But they are just doing their own, like when I say doing their own thing, I mean, they're like doing private chef work, and doing event work. I feel like there's a whole young generation of really talented, wonderful, thoughtful people in food who are not opening restaurants. And I feel like something needs to be done to try to change that before it's too late.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I mean, look, what just happened with street vendors is an interesting example where they legitimized street vending and then they were charging street vendors $550 a year or something to operate on street, which is an unreasonable amount for most street vendors to actually pay. And therefore, the revenue that they thought they were going to be getting from street vendors was actually a mere fraction of what it would have been if they actually made the cost of street vending something more realistic. Now they've lowered it. And I expect that the revenue to the city is actually going to increase overall because you're going to get thousands more actually going legitimate. It sounds like, what needs to happen is the case needs to be made to the city like, hey, you're actually just harming yourself here by making it so hard for these restaurants to open. If we are able to lower the barrier in XYZ ways, you're gonna see tons more revenue. And it's gonna be a rising tide lifts all boats situations.
Totally.
But yeah, it feels like they really almost don't even want you guys to operate sometimes.
Sometimes it really does feel the way. And that's demoralizing. And when I think about the way that I opened Botanica, it took so much conviction, it took so much money, and it took a lot of luck too. We had a couple things where we got so lucky in a way where it just made me even more upset about the big picture because if we were only able to get this place open according to our timeline because I ran into the head of the Department of Building and Safety at a press conference that the mayor happened to have at a building in this neighborhood, and I was able to accost him and plead my case because we were stuck in this weird thing. We converted an apartment building into our prep kitchen and our dish area and our walk-in and our bathrooms, and that apartment building was under a rent stabilized act. So basically no one in Department of Building and Safety wanted to sign off on converting it because we were technically taking 2 units out of a rent stabilized building and converting them to commercial, even though the entire property was zoned commercial. So no one would touch it. And I literally walked up to the head of DBS, who just happened to be at this press conference the mayor was having down the street, and was like, I need help. And he gave me the right person to call, and we got through it. And this was after, a month of me on the phone with the council district office, with the mayor's office, trying to figure out who I could talk to. And so it's like, if that's the type of luck that it takes to get this open, how are we going to keep having small independent restaurants in Los Angeles?
No.
And obviously not every project involves that. But, this isn't a city where there are a ton of second generation restaurant spaces available. In New York, it's like, you very rarely, I would never do a full build out in New York. That's, you always take over an existing restaurant space. But, even with that, also your project has to be so highly capitalized right now. And so I fear for what the barrier to entry is going to, I fear for how it's going to impact the restaurant landscape 10, 15 years from now. We're not seeing it now. Places are still opening, sure. But I think you are seeing it in places like my father-in-law lives on the Upper West Side. And he's been telling me for a couple of years now, we don't have any of our beloved independent restaurants that we used to have, over the last 40, 20 years, 30 years that he's lived there. He's seeing the chainification of of his neighborhood. And that's a risk.
Well,
it's a real risk.
We're seeing that too. I mean, like, look around every neighborhood in Los Angeles. I mean, I live in Highland Park, and like,
yeah, I live in Mount Washington.
Yeah, so you know
this. I see Lulabo and Mendocino Farms
and Jenny's. Like
and Jenny, I know, love Jenny, but still,
every single neighborhood is looking the same. Where basically the only people who can open are these larger chains.
Well, I had an LOI in on the Mendocino farm space. I really wanted to open there. The people who bought the building, I think actually they reached out to us and said, we think this would be amazing for a Botanica. I live in Mount Washington. So that's my little community downtown. And I really wanted to do something there. And they just, they're like, we're hard and fast on this rent that we have to get, which I get. But like, if they had wanted to, they could have come down a little and we could have opened a restaurant there, and it still would have worked out. They wouldn't have made their absolute dream margins, but the level of investment that is required on the landlord side is so high too. And so they ended up going with a very corporate chain that, it's a hometown thing. It's founded by an incredible Angelino, but it is, she's since sold it. It is a fairly corporate chain that was it's a questionable decision for the neighborhood.
It's short-term thinking.
And it's short-term thinking that was driven from prioritizing economics over community development. And if there was some sort of infrastructure in place to take some of the burden off of landlords, reward them for making some of those longer term decisions, then you would see some different things in your neighborhood in a way that I think would be really great.
Yeah. There's only so much Jenny's I can eat, Look, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I feel like we barely scratched the surface. And you've been so generous with your time. I did want to end on Botanica's food.
Yes.
Because we barely talked about the food.
At the end of the day, it's all about the food.
At the end of the day, it all...
But there's so much behind the food. That's
exactly.
That's what we're getting at.
Which is actually a perfect way that we structured this conversation unintentionally to give people insights what happens behind the food. But of course, there's incredible food here too. And, you've also had some evolution too since you've opened. But most recently, I know you hired a chef in the last couple of years?
2 years. No, year and a half.
Time flies.
Restaurant years are, I think, I'm convinced it's like 3 or 4 to 1. What's dog years is like 7 to 1. Yeah. Restaurant years is like 3 or 4 to 1. But the calendar year, he's been with us for about a year now.
It's Chef Alex Barkley. Yeah.
Yes.
Would you give us a little bit of a rundown for folks who, maybe haven't had the chance to dine here yet since Chef Alex has been on board in terms of what they can expect from the menu?
Of course. So first I'll just explain what the Botanica philosophy is about food. So we are really obsessive about our sourcing. Everything that we do starts with really beautiful products that we're sourcing from local farmers, with an emphasis on practitioners of regenerative agriculture. We also source really thoughtful Pacific seafood, wild or products of sustainable aquaculture. And we source also meat from practitioners of responsible animal husbandry, again, primarily California. So all of our dairy is organic California dairy. We're total obsessive freaks about our products. And at the end of the day, it really all does come back to the farmer's market and seasonal vegetables. And so our menu is totally anchored by what we're getting from the market. And then we just, lavish that with creativity. And this is not a restaurant that is hyper technique focused. We have some dishes that are very technical and others that are just simple and beautiful in a way that is, inherited from some of those North Stars we were talking about, like Zuni Cafe. Alex, who came out of some restaurants in Seattle that I knew and loved, and actually our former chef who was with us for 2 years, Kahn, also came from one of my favorite Seattle restaurants. So we have a great multi-year history with Seattle, which I think is one of the best restaurant cities in the country too. Alex is really, really passionate about and exceptional at Western Mediterranean cooking. He loves French cooking. He loves Italian. He loves, a British culinary sensibility in the best sense, in the sort of, Rochelle Canteen, British Italian sense of the word. He, will put a dish on the menu that's inspired by reading an Elizabeth David cookbook. He has this really beautiful sensibility that's actually a little different from how Emily and I cook. We are very Eastern Mediterranean. Again, I have this Levantine background. I've spent so much time traveling through Spain. We pull from a slightly different, lots of overlaps, but slightly different sort of pantry and culinary style. And Alex has brought in this really beautiful perspective that just fits so well. And I think since he's been here for the last year and a half, I think the food is really just a bit more refined and elegant than before. It's still vibrant. It's still so obsessive about everything we put on the plate. It still has that really thoughtful undercurrent of healthfulness and wholesomeness, which is, we really care about nourishment. I will never have anything on a Botanica table that I wouldn't delightedly eat myself or serve to the people who I most love.
Yeah.
And I'm someone, and Emily too, is we're pretty health obsessed. We see functional medicine doctors. We have various autoimmune diseases. We're really thoughtful about what we eat, and also lifelong gourmands. And so, the way that translates to the food in this restaurant is that it's just a little cleaner, a little lighter. We really like to build flavor with acidity and herbs, and layering herbs and spices and acid, as opposed to constantly relying on salt and fat to make something feel satisfying. And Alex is just extremely poetic with his food. He has this beautiful sensibility and is so passionate about produce and about products. And he also has that appreciation for, historic cuisines and historic dishes. And it's just really a cerebral, thoughtful, excellent presence in the kitchen. And I think that Botanica's food right now, it feels very much like elegant wine bar food.
I love that. That seems very on trend.
Then we also have this whole other daytime component. So, at night, the lights are low. We have this menu of beautiful seasonal small plates and a couple larger plates, tons of vegetables, tons of things that are vegan and gluten-free and dairy-free, though we're a completely omnivorous restaurant. We have an incredible natural wine program. We have an amazing cocktail program that also incorporates some of that produce into our drinks. And that's nighttime. Daytime, the space is filled with light. We have an incredible coffee and tea program. We're really obsessive about our NA beverages, which we have an amazing menu of all day. And then we have, again, this vibrant, colorful, wholesome food that's tied to the seasons and tied to the market on the plate. And over the next month or so, Emily and I were just talking about how we're really excited to do a little revamp of the daytime menu. So
exciting.
We're going to be working with our kitchen team on that and lavishing that with a little bit extra love and creativity too.
What is your must order dish? Let's stick with nighttime, but what is your must order dish or dishes for first timers?
So definitely our seared Japanese sweet potatoes with salsa verde, which is, I think, the only thing on the nighttime menu that has been on since the day we opened. And the salsa verde has evolved a little bit. We just about 8 months ago or so, we started putting a little bit of sizzled rosemary in at the very end to give it a little extra something. But that dish, the Japanese sweet potato, I would say, of all of the amazing produce in LA, that was the one that most blew my mind. I wasn't seeing it in farmers markets in New York or Chicago. And so, of course, I'm obsessed with the citrus here. Of course, I'm obsessed with the stone fruit. But the Japanese sweet potato was the thing that Emily and I both just lost our minds over. And so we serve, we par-cook that, sear it on the plancha, and then spoon over this really, really bright, punchy sauce of fresh herbs, some of our preserved lemons, some alliums, some citrus, and then a little bit of fried rosemary. So Japanese sweet potatoes with salsa verde. I absolutely adore our lamb ribs. Those have this really, really flavorful crust of coriander and fennel seed and Aleppo and urfa pepper. They're brined, crusted with whole spices, and then seared. And then those are served over some braised mustard greens, which are just cooked down with all of these different alliums and ras al hanout and salsa verde. That's what I eat every day. Every time I'm working here on Mondays and Tuesdays, I eat like basically a quart of these braised greens. Apologies to the prep team, but they're so good. And those are on top of we make our yogurt in-house. And so we have an herbed yogurt, the braised mustard greens, the lamb ribs. I'd say those are two of my favorite things. And then also, right now we have this, I don't know how much longer we'll be getting great asparagus, but we have this amazing dish of these fat spears of asparagus that are just poached in with a little bit of kombu and then dressed just with lemon and salt and served with basil and a perfect, extremely garlicky aioli. And you just pick them up with your fingers, dunk them in the aioli. Sometimes you get a little basil bite, sometimes you don't. And that to me is like just perfection.
This is cruel that we've ended the interview with this because I'm so hungry now. Like,
I'll send you home with snacks.
Yeah, you do not have to do that. That sounds amazing. I'm going to end on this. Usually we end with like, what are you most proud of? But you got a lot to be proud of. But
Thank you.
I wanted to hear, because last year, Bill Addison reviewed Botanica.
Yeah.
You don't see a lot of restaurants get reviewed 6 years.
Yeah, 6 years in.
6 years in. And it was a pretty glowing review.
Mm-hmm.
How did that feel to read that?
It felt like it's about fucking time. This, this restaurant, and I can say this as, I've never been the chef of this restaurant. When we opened, Emily and I contributed a ton to the menu. It was largely our menu, but we were never the ones running the kitchen day to day because we're doing 5,000 other things. So we've always had really, really formidable culinary talents in the kitchen. And as the time has gone on, they've had more and more autonomy. And so we've had a string of unbelievable, prior to Alex, actually all women, unbelievable chefs in the kitchen. And their food has been so good and so thoughtful and so ethical and beautiful and compelling. And those women have gone on to do some other really amazing things, both in the restaurant industry and in the private world since. And so my first thought was, finally. And again, not out of a sense of desire of recognition, but because it means so much to your team.
Yeah.
I've seen for 7 and almost a half years now, I've just seen how much love and passion and dedication people have brought to this business every day. And you just want things to happen that make them feel good and that make them feel recognized and appreciated and acknowledged for that work. So I felt so relieved and happy for my team that they got that validation. And, like I said, LA hasn't totally recovered. We're still slow. Literally every other restaurateur I know is slow. It's a little demoralizing. It's challenging from a business perspective. It can be a little demoralizing for your team. So when something like that happens, it definitely puts a pep in their step and gives them a sense of motivation for a little while. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, it's well deserved, and the metrics of success you mentioned, it sounds like you guys are constantly striving for something that's even bigger than the food and the impact on the community. I feel like you guys are definitely having that. So it sounds like there's a lot to be proud of.
Thank you.
Well, as I said, you've been extremely generous with your time. Thank you. This is an incredible conversation. I can't wait for everybody to listen to it. If people are looking for Botanica, where can they find you?
Yeah, well, of course, we're here on Silver Lake Boulevard in LA. You can find us online on Instagram at Botanica Food, and our website is botanicarestaurant.com. And then we also have a whole line of pantry goods. We didn't even talk about this, but we just relaunched the Botanica Pantry.
Wow.
In May, coinciding with our 7th anniversary. And so it's a line of spices and pantry goods and sauces and snacks that are just essential to our kitchen. And we wanted to jar them and box them and package them and get them into people's home kitchens too, so that they could eat and cook and host Botanica style. So you can find those, of course, in our market. And we also have an online shop, shop.botanicarestaurant.com, where we sell about 14 or so of the Botanica pantry goods, and we ship those nationally. So we have some amazing spices and preserved lemons and, all sorts of other preserves and spice blends and sauces and things. But the full spread, including dips and our house-made yogurt and our caraway Nigella crackers, the whole shebang is here in the market. So I would say, if at all possible, come by. If not, check us out on Instagram, check out the shop, and hopefully come see us in person sometime.
Come and see them in person, and we'll be putting all that in the show notes. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us, Heather.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the LA Food Podcast. Thanks as always to Father Saul for making the time for us. Thanks to Heather Sperling once again for joining us and telling us her story and the story behind how difficult it is to run a restaurant in Los Angeles these days. I personally found it super insightful. The LA Food Pod is produced with the help of Adam Skaggs, Tim Bertolini, and Tiffany Perez. And please, please, please don't forget to go give us a rating, subscribe, or leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, because that really helps us make our way up the charts both on Spotify and on Apple and get our podcast to more charming, smart, successful people like yourselves. We'll be back next week with another epic episode, but if you're looking for me in the meantime, you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube at the LA Countdown. That's TheLaCountdown. You can also find us at the LACountdown.com, and of course at our free Substack newsletter, LA Food Stack, linked in the show notes. And there's one more place I'm forgetting. Oh yeah, you can also find us on Instagram at LA Food Pod. That's LAFOODPOD.